Hi, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about the classical stuff you should know from classical educators who work at a classical school.
Why are we so good at these intros?
Who knows things. Listen.
We need to hire out someone to do our intros for us.
But I'm worried it would sound like the one you did, AJ, if we hired it out.
That's right.
The kind of like over the top. Whatever you did last time.
The crazy gang limit. Let's not even go back to that.
I wouldn't pay something for what I did. That didn't deserve money.
My name is Graham Donaldson, and I am here with my good friends AJ Hannenberg.
That's me.
And Thomas Magby.
And that's me.
And we all work at a classical Christian school in Austin, Texas called Veritas Academy. We don't really have like I guess Go Defenders?
Go Defenders.
Is that like, you know, you got Go Big Blue and you've got like...
Training hearts and minds for the glory of God?
You don't yell that out at a sporting event.
Wait, you don't?
I think
is that just me?
Every time we yell defense, that's like our call.
Yep, because we're
like even if we're on offense, we can call defense, and it's still kind of...
If you have a great classically themed thing that we can yell at sporting events, please email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net.
Classical cheer?
Could you imagine? So
what would it be?
I don't know. If we could have a song that's like half in Latin.
Yep, that's it.
The fight song for the University of Toronto, Go Blues, where I went to school, is part in Latin. I don't know what it means. It has to do with trees.
I'm just imagining people hollering classical things at the refs, like, thine eyes are clouded.
No, it has to be in Latin. So anyway,
your judgment is besmirched.
If you have been listening with any degree of faithfulness, or at least last week was your first week, you will know that we started talking about the Odyssey, and AJ is here to bring all of those pieces back together. He's here to kick out all of the suitors that have been nesting in our podcast room for weeks, eating our food, drinking our coffee.
Graham, those aren't suitors; those are ants. We actually do have an ant problem.
We got a little bit of an ant problem in this.
It's okay. We're moving campuses in a little while.
And also, AJ, this explains why all of those axes are lined up against the wall, and why you're holding a bow and arrow.
Oh, is that an Odyssey thing?
Yes, those are all Odyssey things.
Okay.
I don't have any axes. I do have a giant hammer.
You do have a giant hammer. It's threatening. Where did it go?
It's over there on the leaning against the desk.
All right, AJ, Odyssey us. Classicize us.
Okay, will do. First, I thought that we've never really talked about, like, we talk about classicism a lot, but we've never really talked about how we're Christian. Oh. Like, that wasn't really a warning that we gave when we started this podcast. So I wanted to take a second and say, yes, we all have a worldview. We're all coming from a specific place. We all go to church. I would say that we probably land pretty much near orthodoxy on a lot of things.
Not even near. We are nestled deep inside orthodoxy.
Right. Yeah. I like Chesterton's book, Orthodoxy. But we don't do that assuming, we're not trying to exclude people who don't believe the same thing. If you are not a Christian, if you don't believe the same things we do, that's fine. You are still welcome to listen to the podcast. We'll try to make it friendly to folks who don't have the same worldview. We would love to hear your take on things. I don't know. I thought I'd say something about it and sort of come out and sort of out us as Christians, because we all are. And so we'll be speaking from that perspective. And if you don't like that, that's fine. Well, we'd love to have you continue to listen and hear your view on things whenever you feel like writing in.
Did you get a comment from anyone about that? Or you just wanted
to
say
I was just listening, and I realized that we just sort of have it as an assumption and never make it overt. So I thought we'd just put it out there for our listeners. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, we are talking about the Odyssey for the second time, which means a quick review might be in order. If you listened last time, some of this will be a review. If you didn't, then this might be a little bit new. The Odyssey is the story of Odysseus, a champion from the Trojan War who is returning home after the completion of the war. He's the guy that invented the Trojan horse. He is a commander. He's a king in his own right in his little island called Ithaca. He did not want to go to war because he had a young son that had just been born. It's
usually why they're young.
Because
they were just born.
You can have a young son who was not just born, right? I could have an 8-year-old. That's still pretty young.
Okay, fair point.
So he had a newborn child, and he had tried to get out of it by acting crazy, and they caught him and made him go to war anyway, and he's been gone for...
Is this a story where he dressed up like a lady?
That's Achilles.
Oh, I love that story.
Odysseus pretended to be an insane person and started sowing salt on his own fields. He tried to pretend that he was insane, and then they took his new baby boy, Telemachus, set it in front of the plow. So either he could continue the ruse of insanity and kill his kid or go to war.
Yeah.
So they caught him.
Really? I feel like crazy Odysseus probably could have even figured out a way to save Telemachus and continue to be crazy. Be like, look at this strange carrot, and then pick up the baby and then keep plowing.
Yeah, he didn't. So he's.
I like your rewrite, though. That was good.
Yeah, that's good. I enjoy that. So he goes to war.
I'm a clever guy.
And the Odyssey is the story of his return from war. It takes him 10 years on the return trip. Most everyone on the return trip either dies quickly or returns home in short order safely. So he's been gone. There are a number of suitors vying for his wife's hand at home, and they are eating all of his wealth and drinking all of his wealth and treating his kid, staff, and wife without respect, just being general hoodlums. It's like having a bunch of frat boys living in your house for the entirety of South by Southwest, but they don't go home.
It's a great analogy. Yeah,
that's exactly what it's like. It's a frat party in your house every day, eating all your stuff.
So were the suitors not actually there for Penelope? Like, were they there for the free stuff?
There were 114 of them.
That's a lot.
There is no way that all of them thought they had a chance with Penny.
Yeah.
And not only that, but at the council where Telemachus tells them to go home, they say, we're going to continue to eat all of your goods until Penny makes a decision.
So they know what they're doing.
They know, and they are actually called to the carpet by some other people in town who say, yes, it's shameful. You are breaking the god's laws. You shouldn't do this. And they pretty much say, who's going to stop us?
Well,
there's a bunch of us.
Yeah.
We're all powerful. You're an old man. You're a young kid. No one's going to challenge us until your mom makes a decision.
Because I guess it's also like Penelope had to keep them there because that's a part of the hospitality law, right? But they were abusing it. Is that
they were abusing her hospitality, and she actually kind of said, you know, you guys have to figure things out. And Telemachus had told them to get out of his house. They just say no.
Okay.
Homer makes it very clear that they are in the wrong. So Odysseus, we find out that it's kind of implied that he's reluctant to go home because he doesn't know the situation. He doesn't know if his kid is still there or is willing to accept him as father. He doesn't know if Penelope has remarried. He actually told her to remarry when there was a beard on Telemachus' face. He doesn't know if that's happened yet. He's not sure if he has a place. He could be facing all kinds of crazy things at home. So he kind of dilly-dallies and looks for adventure and looks for glory. He ends up visiting the underworld, talks to some of his heroes that say, glory's not worth it. What matters is the home, your son, your wife, being alive. And so his attitude changes and he starts heading home. Eventually comes home, kills the suitors, retakes his home, and it's the sort of the story of coming of age of two men at once. We have the coming of age of Telemachus and the coming of age of Odysseus at the same time. And the imagery given is a union of his two sides, his wild side and his domestic side. So that's kind of the story of the Odyssey in review.
That's the olive bush that we talked about last time.
Yeah, that's the olive bush image that we encountered in Book 5 of the Odyssey, and then it kind of returns later in the form of his big olive bush bed, which is kind of a cool bed.
Yeah,
sweet bed. Thomas, did you ever reconcile your two sides growing up?
My wild side.
Yeah, your wild side and your domesticated side. Is that you? Or I guess my question is: do we think that is that like a thing that all men must do?
I think it's a refined balance. When I was a kid and everyone else was jumping off cliffs, I was the one that said, I don't think the risk to fun ratio here is a good one. I'm not willing to risk my bodily well-being for a moment of fun. I was a stick in the mud.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a balance to be had between risk and glory and
I'm kind of a stick in the mud too, but I think this is a website that you all also read, Art of Manliness. Is that something you all have come across before? Never mind, it's okay.
I mean, I know the website.
And they've done some writing on how like the ideal that we tend to point to for masculinity is like the gentleman, but like that's only a certain society that likes the gentleman. There's a society that prefers the ruffian. So like even today, you could say, what is the model of masculinity? Is it someone who's really good at fighting people, or is it someone who is in public life? So I don't know.
Well, then you also have like the cowboy and the samurai and that kind of like person who is the law in a lawless place. Anyway, sorry.
Or if you're Nietzsche, you like the outlaw. He said the model of the true free man was the criminal.
Yeah, makes his own law and then has the power to actually like act out that law. So.
Yeah,
and for clarification, we think that I don't think that's kind of bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's a doof.
Yeah, okay.
I do not agree with Nietzsche very often.
But that's the nice part about this olive tree, that it has both. That there is a wild side, but then there is a refinement to it also.
Nietzsche's mustache is like his one redeeming quality.
Yeah,
That thing's pretty sweet.
I feel like it makes him kind of like one of those Breen whales, or where he has, you know, the teeth that's a broom. I feel like if he just sort of shoves food through his mustache and then like can suck the food off of it later. Like I just imagine him only eating soup where he pours it through his stash and then saves the little bits for later.
You ruined facial hair for me, so that's great.
Yeah, and I've probably disgusted our listeners.
All right, let's get back to the Odyssey.
All right, so today what I wanted to talk about was a couple other things relating to the Odyssey, sort of vaguely. One is the hero's journey, and it was a theory put forward in Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And he talks about something called the monomyth, or the hero's journey. And he's a mythologist. He has all these different stories, and he started to recognize different elements that popped up again and again and again and again in stories, and then kind of put them all together and describe them in an incredibly dry and boring book. Oh man, it is. I've read it. It is. Oh, it's so painful. Yeah. It is just the worst. It does. So this is another thing, but I really want to do a podcast on writing well, because there's a lot of way. I was never taught to write well in high school or even college.
Man. Like the actual pure craft of writing, I can't. It's one of those things where maybe I was and I didn't receive it. Like when I was in 10th grade, maybe I had this brilliant teacher that tried to do it, and I was like, derpy derp fart jokes. And it just never happened.
No, I was never taught it. I never even butted up against the teaching of true style. And my question is, I'm not even sure if it's classical. The writing manuals I'm coming from, one is fairly recent and one is from the 60s. But I feel like that'd be beneficial for everybody, right? Could we nudge it into classical?
Yeah, we probably could, although that writing manual definitely telegraphs that it's from the 60s.
Are we talking Strunk and White?
No, Strunk and White, I think that's
Strunk and White's from
too.
Pre-World War I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But the one from the 60s it's clearly written to kids who are sticking it to the man and riding motorcycles and say things like far out.
Yeah. It's written to, if I understand correctly, I think it's a Stanford professor writing to 1960s. He's realizing that all his students in the 60s are these countercultural, protesting the war. And he's like, so I hear you guys want to protest the war, but have you protested the war with proper writing etiquette? So
it's not strictly classical, but I could probably find some classical resources. Sure. I don't know. It's really interesting. Anyway,
we've talked about rhetoric for the trivium stuff before, so
that's true.
Makes sense.
But my main beef with Joseph Campbell is that he's really bad at writing concretely and putting people in his sentences. There are no people in his book. It's all these ethereal ideas, and it's just painful to read.
But should a work of philosophy? I mean, his is literary criticism, but should that have characters in it?
I don't mean
ideas.
Characters.
Oh.
I mean making people do stuff, talking about people. So a great example of this, and we are a little off track here. But don't worry, listener, I'll get us back soon.
The point of the whole podcast is to be off track, right?
But one of our students was trying to write in her thesis about the concept that doctors evaluating each other would be better because they're not always the ones being evaluated. So she put it ethereally, right? She said the doctor will spend more time evaluating his compatriots than being evaluated himself. It was this big, long thing when she could have put it in concrete terms. She could have said he's going to spend more time on the judge's bench than in the convict's dock, right? Which is an easier way to understand it. It's shorter. It doesn't deal only with ethereal ideas. And we get the point, right? And the point is that there is a person in there. I'm talking about a doctor, right? As opposed to someone in the medical profession, or I don't know, I'm just putting people in my sentences is a better way. We identify with that more readily. The human mind works with concreteness and specifics and people rather than these big ethereal ideas. And if I do this podcast on writing, I'll give you far more examples from Strunk and White and from some other writing manuals. Cool. Anyway, back to it. So he writes this really painful book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and he puts forward his theory of the monomyth. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit of it because it's often related to the Odyssey. And in fact, it's more closely related to Star Wars, which I know you guys know. And so I'll have you guys try to identify some of the spots where Star Wars and the Matrix come in, because
Lucas loved Hero with 1,000 Faces.
Yeah, he actually built Star Wars on the hero's journey and the monomyth. So it's not just a coincidence. Yeah. He crafted his tale based on the monomyth. All right,
but before Joseph Campbell wrote this was just a thing that he saw in works of literature.
Common features in myth. Okay. All right, so there's kind of three primary divisions of the hero's journey, right? It's kind of this big cycle. The first part is departure, second part initiation, third part return. So and each one of those is divided into small phases. So at the very beginning of the hero's journey, there's the call to adventure. And the call to adventure is when something outside of his world kind of breaks into his world and asks him to go out and do something, right? It's an inbreaking into normal life. What would this be for Luke?
Help me, Obi-Wan.
You're my only hope.
You're my only hope.
Yeah.
He gets a message from R2-D2. So
yeah.
It's for
Pretty sure it was a lady.
but R2
it
brings
comes
the message
out of R2.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
It goes-
it's
it's Leia.
but the message is from Leia.
Yeah, from Leia via R2. That was really good.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was really good. All right. So the call comes, and then the hero will typically refuse the call. That's the next phase. So call to adventure, refusal of the call. So what is this for Luke?
I can't do this. We got the harvest coming. My cows. No, my moistures.
That's exactly right. He says, we have the harvest coming. I can't. There's another...
Uncle Owen needs my help in harvesting the moisture.
Yep, he sure does. What about in the Matrix? What's the call to adventure in the Matrix?
I have a job. No, the call
to
is
adventure.
follow the rabbit, follow the white rabbit.
Follow the white rabbit,
Yeah.
right? And it's an inbreaking into his normal world. It's not something that happens normally,
Yeah.
and he
Trinity.
has to go follow it. Yeah, exactly. What's the refusal of the call?
I have a job. I work in the morning.
Yeah, he won't climb out the window. He doesn't really follow.
Yeah.
The pills come later?
Pills come later.
Pills come later. We're not even quite there yet.
Sorry.
And then the next part is supernatural aid. So some sort of magical helper. Campbell says this is often an old man or a crone or somebody that is experienced that can give a token that will help him in his journey.
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan.
Who gives him the lightsaber?
Who gives him the lightsaber.
Okay.
What about in The Matrix?
It's got to be Morpheus.
Not there yet.
Old man.
If it's
Is it the lady with the spoon? There is no spoon.
no, that
That's
comes
later.
Oh man, I haven't watched Matrix
When
in a long
Trinity
time.
extracts the bug. Remember the little bug that's inside
yeah.
him, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!"
I don't.
They're tracking me.
Yeah, they're tracking
Really?
me.
Oh,
Yeah. So they pull out this little creature, and there's your supernatural aid
From his belly button.
from his belly
You
button.
clearly remember Matrix much better than me.
Okay, so he's had the call. He refuses the call. He meets someone that gives him aid, right? And then he crosses the threshold into the actual adventure.
The real story.
He moves from home, from regular life, into actual crazy life. So what is this
So
for
Luke's
Luke?
family gets killed, right?
Luke's family gets killed.
so
He
then
has to go.
And then he
leaves.
enters into the cantina. He enters into the...
It's the cantina.
Yeah.
The cantina is the move from everything he knows into stuff that he doesn't know.
Yeah.
What is this for Neo in the
He
Matrix?
goes down the rabbit hole and he gets the pills and he
It's the
chooses
pills, right?
whichever one was
makes
the
He
choice,
goes into the Matrix or out of the Matrix for the very first time
Yeah.
and realizes that everything is illusion and oh my gosh, I have to eat gruel for the rest of
You've
my
been wearing
life.
like a burlap sack. And
Yeah. And your head's shaved and you are actually emaciated.
Yeah.
You're not.
And you're a battery.
There's like a USB. Isn't
Yeah,
it? Don't they plug-
USB 3. It's a
Yeah,
brand
yeah,
new.
plug
No,
in the back
USB
of the-
4 because
Sorry,
it's a
yeah,
larger jack. USB-C is smaller. Eventually
this
they'll
one.
realize that larger ports are the way to go. Much more information.
That's it. Good.
Yeah, I don't understand why it's not wireless
sense.
in
Yeah,
the
seriously.
super
In the future.
distant future. Why can't we jack in with just like
Ethernet.
Wi-Fi?
cord. Yeah.
Know what I mean?
The connection's not good.
Oh, it's probably because the robots can hack it and mess
good.
with you.
Sure. There
That
you
has to be a
go.
wired connection. You're really thinking through this.
Like muddle your connection with memes, so you show up and you're the singing yodeling kid instead of someone who knows karate.
How many times did you see The Matrix when it was in theaters? Like, were you super excited when it came out?
theaters?
Once or twice?
I think once in theaters, and then many times after that. And
Many?
then
Okay.
I watched the
It
second
is
one and I didn't like
yet
it.
a great film.
And I've never watched the third one. Never watched the last one.
Yeah, I think I've watched half the second one. I
Yeah,
never watched
that's
the
the same
third.
thing with
Yeah.
me.
The point at which they lost me in the Matrix series is when they were doing. Remember that? Maybe this was in the third one, so you might not have seen it. But they're like on the roadway and they're all fighting and cars are exploding.
The second one, when they're fighting like the white dread twins.
Yeah, the white dreaded twins.
Yeah.
And at one point, you see a car flip over and then slide past the camera. And I don't know what happened, but the visual effects people are just lazy because you can see the dude in the car is clearly wearing a helmet.
Yeah,
There are, like braces all over. And as far as I know, people on their commute don't typically wear motorcycle helmets
yeah.
inside their car.
It's awesome.
So I was like, guys, we're at least
They're not
try.
even trying.
Like at least give it a little effort. Okay, so they cross the first threshold. And then they move into the belly of the whale. And this is the final separation of the hero's known world and self. And so the hero shows a willingness to undergo metamorphosis, willing to kind of undergo change. And it's kind of like being fully in and ready to go.
Okay. So sucked into the Death Star.
And it's actually the trash compactor.
And then the trash compactor.
Right into the middle of the Death Star.
But the trash compactor doesn't seem to have a big transformation for Luke. Like specifically the trash compactor for Luke.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It doesn't, and I don't know. I'm thinking that if we're looking at Luke's story on a longer timeline, that the belly of the whale would actually be when he is dealing with Yoda and he goes into the creepy tree.
If you want to do the 3 movies?
And he confronts himself. Because this is actually what it's described as, is the hero confronting himself. He may appear to have died. It's like there's actual real danger here. There's real risk. He's going to change, that sort of thing.
Because Luke's journey is all 3 of those movies, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be in one
I mean, we can look at the initial movie, I think, has its own small hero's journey arc, but all 3 movies have the same kind of thing.
Huh.
It's rings within rings within rings.
So, okay, another crazy Star Wars idea is that it's...
The rings theory?
It's a chiasm. Have you ever heard of a chiasm?
I've heard of the optic chiasm, but I feel like we're talking about something else.
So a chiasm is a method of writing that the Hebrews used to do. And it's essentially, if you can imagine, kind of a big X or V.
X.
Like the beginning.
That's what chiasm means, X.
Yeah, right? Yeah. The beginning chapter and the final chapter will be mirrors of each other, right? An introduction and a conclusion, right? And then they will sort of ramp up in importance, also with mirroring. So it'll be like a greeting to people. So introduction, greeting, and then at the very end, you'll have sort of a farewell and then a conclusion, right?
So every part sort of parallels each other in this X with a center.
Ramping up to a final center core and then
everything
moving
flows out of that.
And the notion is that I think it's the...
So there is a crazy person on the internet who has written a long blog treatise, it's not me,
be honest,
saying that the prequels and then, so movie 1 through 6 is this... like big elaborate chiasm where the first movie, The Phantom Menace, mirrors Return of the Jedi, almost like frame. He's convinced it's like frame for frame.
And you know what? It's really convincing.
Pretty convincing.
Oh, it's so like you can look at it and almost shot for shot, things are arranged the same way. Things are like staged the same way.
So then A New Hope mirrors Revenge of the Sith, or the last one was called, and then Empire mirrors Clone Wars, or whatever the movie was called.
Yeah,
that's it.
I'm not necessarily saying it's good. It may mean that it's overwrought.
Okay, good.
Yes. But anyway, so go read it. I can't remember what it's called. If you just Google Star Wars ring theory, you'll find it. I still can't get over the fact that when I was like 18 or whenever Phantom Menace came out, I was so excited and I sat there and I was like, I'm watching a movie about a trade dispute, and I was kind of
fascinating.
Upset. But then the double-bladed lightsaber made me happy as a kid. So, or I guess teenager.
And he flips around and it's kind of great.
Yeah. Anyway, back to
So we need to move on. We got a lot of stuff to cover here. So we are past the departure. He's finally into the adventure, and then we have part 2, initiation. And so the first part is the road of trials, right? It's a series of tests that they have to undergo. For Neo, this is sparring with Morpheus and learning karate.
Kung Fu.
Isn't that a form of karate?
Whoa. I know Kung Fu. That is the line.
What would this be for Luke? If it's learning Kung Fu for Neo?
It's got to be flying around in the X-Wing and blowing up the Death Star.
No, it goes to Yoda.
The learning.
Are we talking about just New Hope, or are we talking about all 3 of them?
I was thinking just New Hope, but it's lightsaber practice.
That is when he's practicing with like the blaster shield.
Yeah,
and, like,
with my blast shield down, how am I supposed to fight? It's the whiniest
line. The
line.
dinky thing is like pew, and it like zaps him in the shoulder.
Ow! Yeah. All right, so the road of trials.
Han Solo gives my favorite line in all the favorite Star Wars movies about hokey religions and laser swords don't beat a blaster on your hip or whatever it is. Man, I haven't seen it for so long. I gotta go watch it.
All right, so there's the road of trials.
Let's watch Star Wars.
Yeah, let's do it.
The meeting with the goddess. This is where the hero gains items that will help him into the future, or talks to some powerful goddess that maybe gives him some sort of boon that will help him. For the Matrix, this is the Oracle, right? He meets with the goddess, gets some information that's going to be really useful. For Luke, it's probably meeting with Princess Leia, which is a little bit weird.
She kisses him?
Yeah,
gives him a smooch on the shoulder.
Wears white, gives him a little confidence, I guess. Which is so weird in retrospect.
Yeah.
But you're not going to go through classical literature too long until you come across like
Oedipus.
Yeah. So it's
gross,
which is pretty bad.
Yep. Okay, and then we have the temptation away from the true path, or woman as temptress. For Luke, this would probably be temptation by the dark side. For the Matrix, this is probably temptation to remain in the Matrix, right? You can stay. You can refuse the knowledge that you have, we will give you time to...
And isn't there like a character...
You remember him? He's eating that steak, and he talks about how...
Cypher.
Yeah. The steak is delicious, and it's better just to stay in that world.
And then we move to atonement with the Father. I bet you can guess what this is with Luke.
Literally finding out that Vader is his father.
Yeah.
So it's not atonement, unless we're talking about...
Well, if we're talking about at the long story arc, there really is an atonement with the Father. He stands, and they actually have an atonement.
Yeah.
And then we move to apotheosis, which is the point of realization in which a greater understanding is achieved. He learns something big. Armed with this new knowledge, he is ready for the more difficult part of the adventure or the final push. For Luke, this is probably just atoning with his dad, defeating everybody else, taking control as like the new poster child for the rebellion. For Neo, this is probably understanding everything. He's become the one. He knows he's the one. He's embraced it. He knows that he can beat the Smith brothers,
right?
The many Smiths.
Because don't they have the many Smiths at the end of the first movie where they're all flooding him?
No, I think that's later when Mr. Smith starts taking over everybody. All right, so that's the initiation, and then we have the return. Next is the ultimate boon, and this is like the big moment, the big push. He has come to the full understanding. He knows he's the one. He knows that it's his responsibility. He's got the thing from the goddess. He's got everything, and he moves, and he finally does the big thing, or destroys the Death Star, or destroys the Empire, right?
Is it in the Matrix? Is it when he like figures out that he can like stop time or whatever it is?
Yeah, and then he flies at the end. That's the worst part of the first movie, when he like flies off like Superman, and then Rage Against the Machine starts playing, which is a nice bonus.
Which makes up for it.
Yeah. Wake up! It's really good. The flying is lame, but humanity's salvation is within reach, right? He knows he can defeat them easily and reorder the Matrix at his will. And then we have the return, right? This is the movement back to normal life. So we've moved away from normal life. We've spent time in the crazy. We're heading back from the crazy. So sometimes there's a refusal of the return. They don't want to come back, right? They have a new life. Returning to normal life seems drab or lame. They don't necessarily want to do it, but they kind of have to. So that's one possibility. So these don't necessarily come all in order. There's also the magic flight. For Luke, this would be the Millennium Falcon swooping in. If I'm thinking Lord of the Rings, can you imagine what's the magic flight?
Skra!
The Eagles?
The Eagles, right? They help him return from Mordor, where he is. And we actually have Frodo saying he doesn't want to come back, right? He'd rather stay. He's been in this new world. He's experienced the ring. He's no longer a normal hobbit that doesn't like adventure.
He's just
changed. He's changed. They are deeply different people than when they started. So going home, they don't necessarily have a place to fit. Sometimes this means rescue from without, someone else helping them, which is another...
Han Solo flying in.
Han Solo, Millennium Falcon.
Let's blow this thing and go home.
Then they become master of the two worlds, which is like the victory ceremony. It's that they are now in possession of their two halves, right? Their hero-ness, their homeness, they have everything within themselves. They are a master, and that gives them freedom to live. They no longer fear death. They no longer fear returning home. They have grown, I guess, into what they will eventually be. And that's it. The freedom to live is the final bit of the return. So, leaving, initiation, and return, these are the three parts of the hero's journey. The trouble is that they don't necessarily correspond with one of the greatest myths of all time, the Odyssey. What would be the call to adventure for Odysseus?
It would be off screen, right? Or off script.
It would be way at the beginning of his tale.
Being called to go to Troy.
We have the refusal of the call, which is setting his son in front of the plow. Supernatural aid?
The gods are always there.
Don't they favor him?
Athena.
Right, helps him out quite a bit. Crossing the first threshold, this would be when
he goes to...
going to go to war.
Yeah.
The belly of the whale, he's probably on the beach at Troy, and he actually, in fact, goes inside the Trojan horse. The road of trials?
On the way home?
On the way home, probably. Meeting with the goddess?
There's lots of them.
There's a lot of goddesses.
And he meets with lots of them.
Temptation away from the true path.
Oh, yeah. Cersei, Calypso.
Cersei, Calypso. Cersei especially, right? Calypso was less of a temptation. But
oh, poor Calypso.
Oh, man. She's so tragic. I feel for Calypso. So sweet. Atonement with the father?
His dad is lying in like a flea blanket.
Apotheosis, becoming the godlike or mastering everything, realizing that he has come together.
So
I'd say maybe under the olive bush.
He's got a couple. Like he's got the one under the olive bush, and he comes out all glistening, and everyone's like, "Dang!" But I think he also has the big reveal when he takes off his robe, and he's like, "I'm not an old crazy person. I'm Odysseus. I'm here to kill you."
Right. I think meeting with the goddess would actually also be when he talks to his mom in the underworld, or when he talks to Tiresias in the underworld. Right. He gets that thing that will help him return, which is knowledge about what's going on at home. The ultimate boon is when he kills all the dudes, takes control of his house. Refusal of the return?
Nope.
I mean, maybe it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. He kind of refuses for a long time.
Isn't there like an old legend that Odysseus does do another journey?
Yes, later. He has one more journey after him. I don't know exactly what the journey is. I'd have to study it.
So maybe that is what you're saying. That's kind of the weird thing. Like you have to read things outside of the Iliad and the Odyssey to get the whole story.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that could make sense.
Rescue from without. Maybe when Athena comes and helps him. I mean, maybe his son in the final battle. It's kind of weird.
Does his son save him in the battle?
Not really.
Helps him.
Yeah.
Crossing the return threshold, where this is when he finally comes home and she actually, disguises him. Master of the two worlds. It's where his two halves have become one. Freedom to live is afterwards. So I guess there's little pieces, but they don't necessarily line up completely. And it doesn't all happen in the Odyssey. And here's my problem with the hero's journey, right? Does it appear often in myths? Absolutely.
Sure.
Especially when the thing is designed to be like Star Wars, right? It is designed to be the hero's journey. And in fact, they teach it in a lot of writing classes as an easy way to do it.
Because it's just an easy archetype.
But really, I don't think that there's some deep monomyth in humanity. I think it's honestly just recognizing elements of good storytelling. There cannot be a story unless the guy gets a call to adventure. Yeah. There's no story if it's just talking about him going to the store at home. That's not something people want to hear or read, right? The refusal of the call. Well, what normal person wants to go and face mortal peril? Nobody.
That's what I'm just wondering if this is all really similar to the it's like the 5 stages and your exposition, your rising action,
climax, like anger, denial.
No, but doesn't this all feel really similar to that also?
Yeah. And I mean, crossing the first threshold. Well, at some point, you have to actually get into the adventure. Right. Supernatural aid. Well, if you don't have someone helping you, you don't really know where to go. You're just going to wander around in the forest for a while. Yeah. For Frodo, this is the wizard. What's his name? Gandalf.
Oh,
right? If he didn't have Gandalf, what's he going to do? Just go north? He doesn't know where anything is. He's a hobbit. Yeah. Right? So you need someone to tell you where to go. Then the road of trials. Well, it's not an interesting story unless there's something to do. Meeting with the goddess, that's just cool. And Joseph Campbell actually points out that they're not in every story, right? They don't always appear. There's elements, but not always each element. And I think what he's doing is just recognizing cool stories. Yeah. And like going to he talks about the belly of the world, right? Going to the world navel, or the place where all the knowledge is kept, and meeting with the great God. And I think this is really just authors going like, what's the coolest place you can go? Hell, or to talk to God or the gods. And when you're writing an epic about an epic king, you're going to send him to the coolest place you can. You're not going to be like, he went to Canada.
But I mean, as human beings, we like to categorize things, and categorizing things is helpful. Like being able to put things into categories carries a lot of mental freight for us. It really helps us understand something.
Sure.
But when you make it a complete, like, when you make it the thing itself, and you eliminate the possibility for understanding everything outside of a category, you could become bound by your category, and then you can kind of, the world is not in categories. We've invented categories to help us understand the world, and then as soon as we say the category is the only thing, and then we have something that falls outside of it, we don't really know what to do with it.
Yeah,
I don't know. This is sort of. We haven't done a good podcast on Aristotle, but Aristotle is interesting in this because he categorizes everything, and he was sort of a very systematic person. But it doesn't explain everything. This is the central tension of systematic theology, and you want to create a theology that explains everything, but you can't explain God with a systematic theology. But you can do it. You can get really close to it. Yeah. But if you think that your system can contain everything, it's hubris. I don't know. I find it a fascinating thought, because we are in a world where we say, if we can gather data, if we can get all the data we can get with all of the computing power we can get, we can predict or understand things better and create these models that can explain everything. And it's this rush to explaining everything. And yes, we can explain a lot of things or predict a lot of things, but you can't. But not everything. Yeah. That's like the hero's story archetype.
Yeah. Well, my point is, you can do this with almost anything.
Yeah.
Right. If I was recognizing elements of a class, I would say there's the crossing of the first threshold. They walk through my door.
Yep.
There's the meeting with the mentor.
It's you.
The teacher. Yeah. There's the road of trials and the meeting with the unknown. Well, they're going to meet stuff they don't know yet. Then comes, persistence and mastery. And then the freedom and the new knowledge, and then eventually the exit, right? I could
Where's the navel of the classroom?
Good question.
The Beowulf test?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's probably the Odyssey test. That's the toughest one. But that's my point, is that I think Joseph Campbell, I don't think he's doing anything revolutionary. And I don't think you as a listener have to read his book to understand myth. I think he's just putting together all of these elements of storytelling that are there. Can you use it to be a model for good storytelling?
Yes.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
when we've seen it, and we have Star Wars.
Yeah, we've seen it work, but do you need this to understand myth? I don't think so. Do you need this to be a good storyteller? I think it's more important to have a good understanding of humanity than it is to understand the monomyth, right? This is taught in college classes, it's taught in writing classes, but from what I can tell, all it is a recognition of what good storytelling is.
Aren't you agreeing with him then?
Oh, I think we got a plane flying overhead. If you can hear that as an audience, sounds like a missile.
Does that make it a bad thing? Like, to say this is how good stories have been told in the past? Like,
no.
Isn't it fine just to say that?
No, I don't. I think that's totally fine, but I think it would be wrong to tie more meaning to this than it deserves, right?
To say that this is the only way to tell a good story.
Yeah.
Or that this is saying something completely revolutionary about how our myths are made and how they talk to the human person, right? It's just storytelling, right? People telling good, non-boring stories.
Yeah.
So what part of the hero's journey is where in the next movie you bring everybody back to the same place they were before and all the character progression that happened doesn't happen and Han Solo's a smuggler again and not married?
Yeah, prequel movies. But the hero's journey is a circle, isn't it? Like, isn't there a repetitive nature to it too?
So.
He can be called to adventure again, I suppose.
A new adventure.
I don't know. Just the newest movies, Star Wars movies, bum me out.
Okay.
Did you not? Sorry.
Moving on from the hero's journey, we got one more thing to talk about today.
Bowls.
If that's okay. Golden bowls.
Yep.
And I know that's weird.
For only $9.99, you can be the proud owner.
You too can have a classical stuff you should know.
Golden
We're
bowl.
expanding our sales.
The super
Is your
fun thing.
cereal in the morning really drab?
The great thing is when I graduated from college, our commencement speaker, our valedictorian, her whole speech was about drinking from the golden goblet of knowledge.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Oh man, it was a speech.
So
it was a memorable speech.
And the whole analogy stretched way too long. The professors fill that golden bowl. We, our brains, are the golden bowl, and we have the choice to drink or not to drink from the golden goblet. And it was real painful.
Our commencement.
I'm sorry if you're listening. I was not a fan.
Our commencement address. So if you've ever seen the movie Good Will Hunting, so filmed at the University of Toronto, and there's the one guy who so Will Hunting comes in and he's all like swagger math, and he comes in and he takes over. Sort of the attention of this older professor who's played by that Danish guy. And the professor has had this other kid who's like his TA or whatever who hates Matt Damon and because he works really hard and he's not a genius. Anyway, that actor actually is a real mathematician who's brilliant.
Wow.
And he spoke at my commencement.
Wait, the kid? The other kid?
The other kid who played the guy who was upset that Will Hunting came in and took his professor. He is actually a really successful mathematician, and he spoke at the commencement address, and I didn't understand anything.
Let me relate our journey through college to an equation.
Yeah. He may have talked about The Matrix, but not the movie.
We are X, and our hearts are when X is placed over -1. And everyone's just like, what is
he talking about?
Okay.
Hey, what about golden bowls?
So the golden bowl theory as it relates to the Odyssey is that Odysseus goes all over the place. Right? He is at the island of Circe, he's at the island of Calypso, and if you look at a map of where he traveled in Greece, It's total insanity. At one point, he's almost home. Then he goes back to the island of the god of the wind, Aeolus. And then he's in the underworld. He's all over the place. And it's really hard to sort of put together a mental picture of what his journey was or looked like. Well, nearby in Egypt, it was a common trope to have a bowl or a plate with engravings around the edge, right? And this isn't only in Egypt, right? We see kind of the same thing happen with the Hebrews, and the same thing happen with the Gilgamesh folk. What are they called? The
Sumerians.
Yeah. So the Sumerian culture, same kind of thing, and it's a pretty common depiction of what we would call a cosmic journey, where a hero leaves the center of the bowl, travels around a series of trials depicted in small carvings around the edge of the bowl, and then sort of re-enters normal life after having completed the circuit. And the circuit follows the path of the sun. So the way they understood the sun to work in ancient cosmology is that in the mornings, it would sort of blunk, like jump out of the ocean, and then kind of make its circuit across the sky in its sphere, and then go kablunk back into the ocean at the end of the night, and then travel under the earth as it was kind of a big flat disk, or through Tartarus or whatever, and then, you know, to jump out of the ocean again at a later time. And in Egypt, this is often depicted as relating to goddesses, the goddess of the sky, or the god of the sky, and the goddess of night. And so the sun would sort of follow these two things and be in their realms, and there was sort of a whole rebirth imagery happening when the sun is rebirthed in the morning. And then, so there's two kind of cosmic junctures, one in the east and one in the west, where sky and underworld meet, right? They are so close at these cosmic junctures where the sun comes out of the ocean and goes back into the ocean. So if we think of Odysseus's journey less as a random journey all over Greece and more like following the path of the sun, it might make a little more sense, right? Because if I'm going to remind you of a little bit of Greek cosmology here, but they understood all of the disk of the earth, a big flat disk, to be surrounded by something called the ocean river, right? It was just this big river that went around the whole thing, and past that became the kind of the area of night or twilight, because you were actually outside where the sun reached, right? The sun made this big circuit, and if you went past where the sun came out of the water, well, you were in twilight. And that's actually what happens to Odysseus when he visits the land of the dead. It's easy to miss when you're reading the Odyssey, because it just says, we sailed past the ocean river, and then we got to the land of the people of the night.
But this is a huge deal, right?
It's enormous. Yeah. He just passed out of the known universe into the unknown universe to talk to the folks of the dead, past where the sun rises, and then eventually he comes back in. And the island he meets prior to that episode is the island of Circe, who is the daughter of the sun. Right? Well, it says that her house is where the sun rises in the east. And so if we think of her kind of like a goddess at the cosmic juncture, like there's Isis and Nephthys that are the two sisters who protect the dead in, I think, Egyptian mythology. Yeah. So if we think of Calypso on one side, the west, because she's the daughter of Atlas, who stood in the west, according to Hesiod, I think. And then Circe, who lives in the east, we can think of Odysseus's journey like following the path of the sun. The first half is we find him often in caves, often threatened with oblivion. We have the lotus eaters, right? We have the Cyclops, happens in the cave, and so he's following the path of night. And then he hits the cosmic juncture, the east at Circe's house, where the sun rises. He goes blunk out of the world, talks to some folks of the dead, goes blunk back into the world, and then continues on the path of the sun, past the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, and then he actually hits the island of the sun, right, and eats the cattle of the sun, continues on to Calypso's island, which is the last juncture before he can re-enter normal everyday life, right? And as he re-enters normal everyday life, he actually loses everything. So he cannot return to this cosmic journey. So an easy way to understand Odysseus's journey is to think of it less like I said, like a random traveling around everywhere, but more like a circuit of the known cosmos. He follows the path of the sun, traveling around the known universe, even visiting the realm of the gods, exiting where the sun shines. He sort of goes on this big cosmic tour, right? It's an easy way to think of this. It's kind of like what Dante did, right? Dante went through the known universe as the medievals understood it. Well, Odysseus may have done the same thing. So I present this idea to my freshmen, and they usually reject it, right?
Because?
because it feels like a stretch. The journey of the sun is a very small portion.
Freshmen
of the book.
hate order.
Wow, okay. So that means they reject the hero's journey too, right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, good.
Well, it's that the last half of the journey is really short, and that I mean he hangs out with the Cyclops, but it's not like it's dark all the time, right? He goes into a cave. It's not
Cyclops
really
gets blinded. Oops.
right. It's not really overt.
It's pretty dark.
That Circe is where the sun rises. It's especially not overt that Calypso is in the west. I mean, it seems like we're trying to pull together some pretty sketchy pieces here. And the ocean river, usually for the Egyptians, it was Ouroboros, the snake that eats its tail, representing eternity, that goes around the edge of the bowl. So I don't know. It feels like a stretch, right? And it feels kind of to me like a stretch. But it would have been a common trope for the Greeks. They would have had bowls like this that depicted these heroes' journeys. Or at least they would have seen them with the nearby Egyptians, because they're kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
I just think that maybe it's an easier way for you as a reader to think of the Odyssey, right? He visits gods, he visits goddesses, he goes out of the realm of the sun. That much is true. That actually does happen. So it's an easy way to sort of think of him making a circuit of the cosmos and getting to tour those places that the Greeks would not have been able to tour.
But would you say that Golden Bowl would explain the Odyssey well, but maybe wouldn't explain other epic myths as well, but the hero's journey applies to more stories than the Golden Bowl theory would?
There's no sense to putting them both together other than they both relate to the Odyssey. I wasn't trying to draw a parallel between the two.
I'm asking if you think Golden Bowl is better for the Odyssey than the hero's journey. Because what you said is that there are parts of the hero's journey that are missing in the myth.
Or at least that it doesn't feel like they are orderly. I think that they both are aids to understanding what is happening in the Odyssey, but I think perhaps the best way to approach it is just to read it like a story, right? Think of him as a person going through a trial and try to take lessons from it if you can. Maybe they're just, aids to understanding. And it actually does, we see the same hero's journey, or the cosmic bowl journey happen with Gilgamesh a little bit too. Remember, he goes through one of the cosmic junctures. He travels under the mountains through the darkness and then ends sort of in the realm of light and the gods. And I think the mountain he traveled through was legended to have its roots like in the bottom of the earth and its roof in the sky. So he kind of does this same kind of bowl journey and then returns.
Yeah. And I bet you see more of that since you teach ancient literature, right? Because by sophomore year, I don't know, is the Golden Bowl something?
Frankenstein isn't really hitting all the cosmic spots
in the same way. But
we just do less epics. We just do less epics in 10th grade, and we're in novels, or we do Paradise Lost. But I've never sat down and sort of thought, because we don't read all of Paradise Lost in 10th grade. We just read books 1 through 4 and 9 through 12. So I've never really gone through and thought about like the structure of Paradise Lost as a whole. But I'm sure, Milton was brilliant. So I'm sure there's something. Yeah. I'm sure like you don't write an epic without
reading
being
the epics,
completely like drenched in the structure of old epics, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope this has helped you to understand the Odyssey and kind of approach it with a new, with a little bit more knowledge. So I have a last sort of final question. If you were going to write a story, or if you were going to write something like a hero story, AJ, would you personally say, I'm going to have the hero's journey and the Golden Bowl, just the rough outlines, I'm going to have them on a piece of paper beside me as I think about my plot, or are you just going to, or do you think that's kind of hokey? Or would you just sort of do cool stuff like what you said earlier? It's hard to avoid having elements of the hero's journey in there, and it does provide a good structure. I would think a lot more about the kind of character that I wanted to build and style, perhaps. I don't think it'd be a bad way to go about things. The cosmic journey, maybe not so much. Yeah. We're a little less tied to that these days. But thinking about, okay, he needs some sort of call to adventure. He needs to want to stay home because all of us do. Then he needs someone to tell him where to go. Like that's pretty good writing style, right? That happens in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody have a commonplace book offering?
Negative.
Ooh.
H-Berg?
I had one, but I left it in the car.
I also do not have any because that's the way I do things.
Okay, we would like to hear from you about the writing episode. If you'd like to learn some basic style things on how to write well, I would like to know if that would be something that you would benefit from.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more of a
you.
technical podcast, but
Yeah, a little bit. I could make it entertaining. I promise
I'm
you.
sure you could.
Yeah,
I believe.
So this has been a journey, a hero's journey, if you will.
Oh my gosh,
I even
Graham.
believe that this podcast, if you will go back to the beginning of this podcast, please tell us if we in this podcast have inadvertently followed the hero's journey or the golden bowl theory.
I refuse the call.
I would love to hear.
I'm refusing it now.
the call.
At the place, I would love to see that mapped out for us.
Thank you.
And you can send that to us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. You can find us at classicalstuff.net. You can quote towards us at classicalstuff at.
No,
at.
it's just at.
It's at.
Yeah.
At Twitter's. You can find us.
It sounds like when we're trying to say the Twitter handle that we have like a frog in our mouth who is actively hugging our tongue. And
If you are Classical Stuff at Twitter and you want to donate your username to us, like hit us up, man. We can do like an exchange of money in a briefcase in an alley.
What? No, what?
Ooh, dibs. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Wait, can I be the sniper?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, this is fun. Anyway,
out.
If he doesn't deliver the address, we take him out.
we take him down.
Yeah. Did I just threaten murder? On
Yeah, I think you just did.
podcast?
Yeah. That's going to be...
Anyway,
It's okay. I'm a
out there.
terrible shot.
Oh,
That's
okay.
actually not true. I'm kind of a good shot.
no, take him down is like
You're not helping your case.
I know.
it's like a euphemism for going out for dinner. Like we're going to
Take him out.
take him
Yeah,
down.
Taking him down.
Taking him
town.
down. Taking
Yeah.
him downtown. We're going to Outback Steakhouse. And
Oh, Outback? Well, they have the
That's where
bloomin'
you
onion,
go?
right?
they got
Yeah,
the
that makes it worth it.
bloomin' onion, which sounds like
Disgusting.
or just like a disease in the Middle Ages.
It sounds like maybe an onion that you left in the dark closet
That's right.
for too long,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
open up, you're like,
That's a
oh, it's
bloomin'
blooming.
Spores everywhere. All right. But thank you
And
for
on
listening.
that positive note,
Yes. Go forth, our little blooming onions out
yes.
there, and blooming with knowledge. And we thank you for
heed
listening.
the call, find a mentor.
That's right.
Go through the road of trials, talk to the goddess, because she's cute.
She cute.
Refuse the temptation of the goddesses, other goddesses that are bad ones. Atone with your father, etc.
That's just good advice.
Yeah.
All right, this is Classical Stuff, signing off.
Bye.
Bye.